Hello YouTube and welcome back to another book review from me, your host, Logan Albright. Today I'm talking about a real life story, a nonfiction book, kind of a rarity for this channel, that I picked up just on a whim in a bookstore because I thought it looked interesting. It's got everything I like in it. This book is Icebound, Shipwrecked at the Edge of the World by Andrea Pitzer. This is a story of the explorer William Barents, who is a Dutchman who was hired to try to find a northeast passage above Norway, above Russia, to get to China. People were still a little fuzzy on the entire shape of the continents and the size of the globe at that time. This was in the 16th century, and they thought that you could easily get over Norway and Russia and find a trading route to China, because the alternative was to go south around Africa, around the Cape of Good Hope, which was no fun and took a really long time. So he was chartered by the Dutch throne to do this, and he did his darndest to do it. And he ended up, he tried 3 times, and he ended up getting stuck in the ice on the 3rd time and had to winter on the island of Nova Zemlya in Russia, which was certainly an ordeal that he had to go through. This is the basic plot of the book. It's a real story, and I find it fascinating. I love stories like this. I love exploration. I find exploration really thrilling. It's like a nice adventure, that happen in the real world. I love sailing ships. I find sailing ships in the age of sail fascinating, and I love to read stories about people who are out at sea for long periods of time. And I love the far north. I don't know why I have a mysterious fascination with the far north. There's something magical about it, the northern lights and the cold and the snow and all the weird animals that live up there. And it's a fascinating part of the world. And I'm going to Iceland later this year on vacation, so this is getting me in the mood for that. I think it's going to be a lot of fun. This was great because this is a fairly early exploration. It's 16th century. It's after the New World is discovered, but it's like just after Magellan had circumnavigated the globe. And William Barents was like the first real polar explorer, first person to really find out what was going on up there. And he encountered polar bears for the first time, and that was wild. And it's funny because the first time they saw a polar bear, they thought, we're going to capture this and bring it back to Holland as a trophy. And then they quickly realized what a terrible idea that was, because polar bears are immensely strong and ferocious, which they had no idea. So that didn't go well at all. And then they ended up getting trapped and having to spend an entire winter in the land of the midnight sun, where it just is dark 24 hours a day for half the year, pretty much. And they were fighting off polar bears, and they were fighting off walruses, and they were fighting off scurvy. The illness scurvy was not well understood at the time. They knew that they got it from being out at sea for a long period of time, but they didn't know about vitamins. They didn't know about vitamin C. And so they're all kind of horribly afflicted with scurvy because there's not a lot of vitamin C up in the North Pole, in the polar regions, in the Arctic Circle. So they had to, they were eating a lot of Arctic foxes, and the foxes have just enough vitamin C in their flesh to kind of keep them going barely. But it was a miracle that they survived the winter. It's interesting to see how the first instinct of explorers is, when encountering new life forms, is to kill it. They wanted to kill the polar bears. They wanted to kill the walruses they came across and harvest their tusks because they believed that they were valuable as like elephant ivory. Wanted to bring those back. Just immediately, whenever they saw anything, they tried to kill it. Yet they were surprisingly friendly with their fellow human beings. They encounter some Russians. They encounter some Sami people in the north of Norway, and they all get along pretty well and try to help each other because it's such an unforgiving climate up there. There's just so little you can do. So they were all trying to keep each other alive. And the crew itself got along pretty well. There was a couple kind of minor attempts at mutiny when things started going really bad, but for the most part, things went pretty well. And I was talking to people about this book, and they all thought, oh yeah, and they had to resort to cannibalism to survive and things like that. No, they really stuck together pretty well, and there was no cannibalism. A few people did die along the way, but they were mostly held themselves together surprisingly well, given the difficulty of the voyage, being gone for a year, having half the year spent in total darkness and cold and malnutrition and fighting off polar bears. It's a wild, wild ride. And I learned a lot too. I learned a lot about the geography of the world. Like, for example, I knew about the Tropic of Cancer and the Tropic of Capricorn, but I didn't know exactly what those were. And I didn't know that the Tropic of Cancer is the northernmost point in the globe where the sun will be directly overhead at a certain point in the year. And the Tropic of Capricorn is the southernmost point of the globe where the sun will be directly overhead at some point of the year. So that's interesting. And then like the Arctic Circle, I saw a meme on Facebook at one point that was like, Arctic means bears and Antarctic means no bears. And that's funny because there's polar bears in the north and there's not polar bears in the south. But that's not why it's called that. It's called the Arctic Circle because of the constellation Ursa Major, which is prominently visible in the Arctic sky. So that's where it gets its name from. It doesn't get its name from the polar bears. It was called the Arctic before anyone had ever discovered polar bears and knew that they were up there. So I didn't know that. That was fascinating to learn. And, you know, learning about the trying to navigate and trying to find these trade routes and how important it was to be able to trade goods and spices with the East. That was really interesting to me. So I just had a great time kind of delving into this book and learning about the exploration and the age of sail and astronomy and all that kind of stuff that goes into navigating by sea. It's a good yarn, and I love books like this. I love seafaring adventures. So I just wanted to highlight it. It was a quick read. I got through it in just a few days, and I wanted to highlight it on this channel because if you are like me and you enjoy these sorts of things, you might also enjoy reading Icebound, Shipwrecked at the Edge of the World by Andrea Pitzer. I guess she is a journalist and a historian and has done a lot of writing of other books. I haven't read anything else by her, but this was certainly a lot of fun. I recently read another book that was trending on the New York Times bestseller list that was also a naval adventure, and I didn't really like that one as much. I didn't care for the way it was written. I thought it didn't feel like it was as historically accurate. It felt like it was trying too hard to make it an adventure rather than just a history. This one I didn't feel that way about. This one I felt like it was just exciting on its own. It didn't need to be embellished, and it was just a good time. So I like books like this. I like popular histories. I like to learn about the world through not just a series of dates and names and battles and things like that, but the actual stories of the people. And William Barents has become, something of a hero in the Netherlands. They have statues of him there as one of these great explorers. And it's interesting because there's a way of looking at it by saying that he was a failure as an explorer because he didn't make it to the North Pole. He didn't make it to China. He got stuck halfway towards his goal and came back. But he went a long way towards furthering scientific knowledge of the Arctic Circle and furthering their knowledge of the globe. And he tried really hard and he was undeterred by hardship. And I think that's, he gets an A for effort. So I was really impressed by him as an explorer. And I don't think you have to have necessarily really succeeded at discovering what you set out to discover to be a successful explorer. And I think William Barents is going to go down in history as one of my favorite explorers, certainly, because he sure had a lot of guts and a lot of gumption and was willing to go and navigate these perilous icy seas and try to figure out what was going on up there. So that's what I have to say about Icebound. I really loved it. If other people would like to read this book, I encourage you to do so. And if you have other seafaring adventures of a similar style that you'd like to recommend to me, please leave those in the comments below. In the meantime, if you enjoyed the review, please like the video, subscribe to the channel, click the bell for notifications, and check back next week for another book review because I give one every single week, and you never know what it's going to be. It might be a nonfiction book like this. It might be a novel. It might be something else. Who knows? It could be poetry. A couple weeks ago, I did poetry. So, you never know what I'm going to do. But check back and make sure you're subscribed so you see what comes up. Thanks so much for watching. I've been your host, Logan Albright, and I will catch you next time.